Hello there and welcome to Black Jackal Gaming. We're going to take a look at the Space Marine Primaris problem. Are all the units a little bit too similar? There's quite a few of the troop type units and all the variations pretty much have the same profile. Apart from the odd core ability or keyword change, there's not a lot of variety in those units. Now the models do look great, but some of them, especially the troop choices, they struggle for a purpose on the tabletop. Gravis has a bigger place on the tabletop, but with true scale Terminators, they now start to appear that Terminators were a design afterthought. Looking at the troop choices, we currently have the Intercessors, Infiltrators, Incursors and Reavers, and they're all too similar to care about them really. They pretty much all come with a bolter with a slightly different name. And the bolter has the odd keyword difference. It might have precision or ignores cover, but they're pretty much all pretty identical. The majority of them are going to rock out as 0 AP, or you might get the odd one like with the Intercessors that has -1 AP. You then have the same problem with the melee weapons. They all come with a slightly different named combat weapon, and the odd one has a keyword, but apart from that you are literally just having strength 4 0 AP attacks. Now they tried to make them a little bit different at this point because they are still way too similar, so they give them some core abilities, so you might see a change of deep strike, scouts or infiltrators instead, but they largely are going to occupy the same space on the tabletop. Because of the limit on what characters can join them due to the keywords, you're limited to what buffs you can give out because only certain characters can join phobos and reaver units and vice versa. Even though these are all essentially troop choices, the only one that's actually battle line is Intercessors. The other three aren't battle line, but they're not exactly elite units at that either. So how do we fix the problem with the bloat? Well, we really can just combine the three phobos and reaver units to start with. We'll add together some of their core abilities to make them more of a cohesive unit on the field, so they've got a true purpose. So to give them a difference to the Intercessors, we want them to be the forward deploying unit, the one that's going to be the vanguard of the army. So we give them the Infiltrators, so they can set up in no man's land, Scouts 6 inches, so they can be reactive to the deployment and whether you're going to go first, and Stealth to allow them to be a bit more thematic and play into that they will be forward facing, getting there first and hiding and waiting for the rest of the army to arrive, whilst trying to deal damage and gather intelligence at the same time. For the war gear, we'll just give them a standard bolt carbine to make it look different to the bolt rifle for the Intercessors. We'll give it the heavy keyword precision, ignores cover. This leans into the fact that they're going to get there pretty quickly set up and then scope things out, so they're going to get their additional +1 to their hit roll. They're going to be able to target characters with precision and ignores covers, so it gives them that slight more marksman feel to them. They'll have the pretty standard bolter profile, being 24 inches, 2 attack, strength 4, 0 AP, 1 damage. For the melee, since they're out front by themselves, they need to be able to handle themselves in combat, so we'll ramp this up a little bit in comparison to the Intercessors. We'll give them the paired combat knives, we'll give them precision and sustain hits 1. Apart from that, it'll be pretty standard, 4 attack, strength 4, 0 AP, 1 damage. For the datasheet abilities, we'll give them 2. First of all, the Omni Scrambler, so this prevents units from setting up or arriving from reserves within 12 inches of the unit. And the Grapple Launcher, so when they're making a normal advance or charge moves, they can ignore all vertical distances when moving. So with this, we've got the appearance of quite a fast unit that doesn't actually have any war gear to allow it to fly or jump around or even deep strike. It's going to stop things from setting up near them. It's kind of like they're the forward focusing, arriving early, setting up in ambush and knowing their surroundings so things can't just show up around with them. And when they do need to move, they're scoped out the area so they can move through it pretty quickly. This would remove 3 units, combine them together and set them apart from the Intercessors, making them seem a little bit different. They have an actual purpose. They're more in line with the Scouts, but they have a couple of extra things added to them for a little bit of variety. Taking a look at the other type of infantry unit that we got, the Gravis armoured infantry unit. So the Gravis units, they are in a better position because they do have more variety. They've actually shown up with a purpose. You've got the Eradicators that have the short, high-powered firepower. You've got the Aggressors, which can get in there and have short-ranged, quite low strength firepower and have the power fists. And then you have the Inceptors that are deep striking with the plasma, so there's quite a bit of variation there in them. They do suffer from the Dominus effect, that was the 3-6-man unit. It would be much better if you could have a 5-10-man units. They'd look better on the battlefield, and you could probably tone down some of the data sheets so you're actually getting more value per man rather than ramping it into what is essentially one T6 3-wound body. The heavy intercessors, on the other hand, are in a bit of a weird place, just being a tougher extra wound, essentially intercessor with the strength 5 weapon. You're not paying too much more points for them at the moment because they're quite cheap, but they do struggle to have a real purpose. If they're more focused on them being able to take additional heavy weapons, because they can take the 1 heavy weapon at the moment, if it could be 2 or 3 heavy weapons per 5-man squad, then you could make these more of a standout unit that serve an actual purpose to bring in heavier firepower, and they could potentially take the spot of the Devastator's role once they eventually get moved into Legends. The Interceptors are crying out for character support at the moment. They're constantly just being given abilities where they have to be by themselves without getting much support. They could really do with having the jump interceptor captain. I know he is in Gravis, but they do need a character to go along with them just to get more out of them rather than being a YOLO suicide unit. Other armies have plenty of mixed toughness units where the character would be a higher or lower toughness, so it wouldn't be out of this world for it to happen. It's currently happening all over the place, just not really in Space Marines. You're even seeing the mixed toughnesses in Death Watch, so that there are precedents set within Space Marines anyway. Aggressors were definitely the replacement for Terminators. They've got the melee capability with the strength 4 weapons, and they have the rocket launchers as well that can go on the shoulders, so they definitely come in as the Terminator replacements. Now, they don't look as good as Terminators, so when Terminators have come in, they're now in a strange position because Terminators have much more options. They have the different melee capability, the different loadouts you can give them, and there's multiple characters that can join them to buff them as well. So aggressors are now, they're pretty much on the whims of the addition rules. If the addition dictates that small arms fire and power fists are really good, then they're going to do well. If not, they'll have to have an ability to go with them, and if the ability doesn't quite work out, they're going to be a very weak unit. Eradicate is another unit that's going to be really tied to the addition rules. They lost one of their attacks going into 10th edition, so it is only 3 attacks, so then they do have to give them abilities to maximize the efficiency out of those attacks. When you do essentially just have strength 8, strength 9 shots with the variable damage, you're not really getting much consistency out of them, and at the price point they are slightly pricey for what you're actually getting out of them. Especially coming in the 3-man unit. Again, if these were a 5-man unit and they made them slightly cheaper, they'd be a very good option to take, but they're definitely paying a premium for being really good in 9th and really good in 8th. When it comes to the characters, there's 4 lieutenants currently available. That's with different data sheets. There's plenty of others you can buy, but there's only 4 data sheets. Now, none of these come in Gravis or Terminator armor. None of them have jump packs, so they're all just Tacticus and Phobos, really, and there's a Reaver one in there as well. The problem you got that Phobos and Reaver are quite interchangeable, but not always when it comes to the abilities and the units they can join, and it can be really confusing for new players, especially when you look at the models and the actual data sheets, and they're incredibly similar. Some of these characters also don't have the same core abilities as the unit they're being designed to join. Like the Reaver Lieutenant doesn't have the deep strike ability, and that's due to the fact that he can't take the grav shoots or the grapple launcher, so he can't ignore vertical movement either. So if you put him in the unit, you're losing the ability to use those 2 pieces of war gear, which is probably the reason why you're going to be taking the Reavers anyway. The Chaplains, on the other hand, are in quite a good place. There's 4 versions of them at the moment. We have the standard Tacticus one, Terminator, a Bike Chaplain, and a Jump Chaplain. The Jump Chaplain is the only one that doesn't have a new model, and that will hopefully be updated soon. But even though they've got 4 different characters for the Chaplains, 4 different data sheets, they all actually serve a purpose in their armor type, and they bring something to the units they join. The Chaplains, you're mostly going to be joining the likes of the Blade Guard veterans, and the Terminator is going to be with the Terminators, obviously. The Bike is the only one that can actually join the Outriders, so it's quite good in the Stormlance Task Force for the White Scars one. And the Jump is the only character that can actually, outside of the new captain, that can join the new Jump Intercessors, and they can also join the Vanguard veterans with jump packs. When it comes to the Apothecaries, they've actually very limited who they can buff now. In the likes of 9th edition, they could pretty much buff anyone if they were within their aura. Now it's literally just the unit they're within. They also don't grant the feel no pain with them anymore. It's literally just bringing back one unit in your command phase. Because we don't currently have a Terminator or Gravis apothecary, they made a new one called the Biologist. But I think they kind of felt like that they didn't have a lieutenant for Gravis, which was really missing, rather than the apothecary. So they basically give the Biologist the lieutenant ability for the lethal hits rather than any form of a healing ability, which just makes him come across quite odd. He is a good model and he does buff them really well, but he is literally just a lieutenant rather than an apothecary. True scale Terminators come out and they come right out of the gate with 3 new characters, all of them quite good given relevant buffs. They got the new Captain, Chaplain and Librarian, all awesome models and all serve a purpose within the unit, which is really good, which kind of leaves the Gravis lagging behind a little bit. So the Gravis are just literally stuck with the Captain, which doesn't really give much of a boost outside of using a free stratagem, and the Biologist, whilst good, isn't an apothecary, but he does grant those lethal hits, which is quite nice. But then you do have the Inceptors, which have no character buffs whatsoever, which is a bit of a shame. I think the question really is, should Gravis and Terminator models be able to join both types of units? Should they be locked to just their armor type? I think would be in quite a nice position if they did open it up. It'd give more options for the Gravis units without having to create new models that are essentially relatively the same. So if they could join both armor types, you've then got 2 captains, a librarian, a chaplain and an apothecary, especially if they turn them into a real apothecary rather than a lieutenant. It means they can actually focus on other units and factions rather than keep bringing out these quite niche characters for Space Marines. I mean, they might have room in there for a lieutenant to go in as well, but they are at the position now where they can focus on other things instead. So we're at the point where the Space Marine Codex, it has a lot of data sheets, and we know this has been a problem for a while, and they really need to look at condensing and merging some of these down so there's a little bit more variety within the units rather than there just being a slight modification causing a new data sheet. GW did do an okay job during 10th by removing some of the redundant units from the Codex. A lot of them was firstborn ones that they moved out, that there was either no models or there was a new unit for, or they just moved them on anyway, just get them out of the way. They also moved on the likes of the veteran Primaris intercessors, which didn't actually have its own unit, but did have a place in the 9th edition Codex, but was largely a unit that never saw the tabletop because it was pretty pointless. They could go with a little bit more merging if they looked at releasing some upgrade kits for the intercessors and the heavy intercessors. So if they give them some special and heavy weapons, the intercessors, even if they just give them the ability to take their hell blasters and maybe another crack launcher per every 5 man. The heavy intercessors, I would really like them to lean in them being heavier weapons, so if they could take 2 or 3 heavy bolters per 5 man, that would be really nice, especially if you give them a couple of other options. And then if you could really look at getting rid of tactical squads and devastators, being that they are firstborn units and they are looking quite dated at the moment, but we don't really have units to properly take their place because there's not enough options available in the likes of the intercessors and heavy intercessors. So a simple upgrade kit with extra options and a slight modification to the datasheet, and we could get rid of 2 more of the datasheets. I think we spoke about combining the phobos and Reaver units because there is a lot of redundancy there, but you can do it with the characters as well because a lot of them they're very similar apart from they're locked to certain units. They all give you, like the lieutenants, the lethal hit, and then there's one other ability which is usually neither here nor there, so really they could do with combining them together, and then you would just have one phobos / Reaver, captain, lieutenant and librarian. They could keep the other lieutenant there for the moment with the combi weapon and give him a little bit of a rebrand so he wasn't potentially a lieutenant, because he does have quite a niche spot within the Codex at the moment, being one of the only lone operative characters that you can have, and he's actually quite nice model and he's got a good place in the Codex. The others are neither here nor there, they're quite similar, where this guy stands out on his own. The Eliminators were meant to be the new scout unit. They are very different to the other phobos units, so you can't really remove them. They'll have to stay as they are, and they're quite different to the scouts as well to a certain extent. What they really do need is to increase the squad size. It'd be nice if they could go 5-10, but we're never going to see that. But if they could go 3-6 like they did with Outriders, they were just a 3-man unit in 9th, and in 10th they went up to a 3 or a 6. It'd be nice if they did that with Eliminators as well, just so you get a little bit more bang for your buck. Then the poor Judiciar, who's got quite a nice model, and the data sheet's quite nice, albeit a little bit niche. He could probably be combined to make him a chaplain, even if they wanted to make him just a slightly different chaplain, like a grand chaplain or whatever they'd want to call him, and just give him an additional ability to make him cost more. At the moment, he's just kind of sat there with quite a nice ability for fight first, but one that you're not really going to lean into because the chaplain's just much better, and he should probably just be a chaplain type character rather than by himself. When Primaris first came out, they struggled to get on board with them because they were too similar to the firstborn whilst trying to make them different. A lot of the units that come out were far too similar. It's like they just asked some designers to design some cool units without giving them a proper mandate about what they should expect. And then there was a couple more of elite units that come out that were quite cool and meant to replace some iconic units. Since then, there's been a lot of units that come out that have stood on their own. So the Gladiators are really nice. You've got the Repulsors, so they have a place. They're not redundant. They're not leaning too much into any of the other tanks. The 3 Gladiator variants are much better than the Razorback variant and the Predators, so they can really be removed. I think the Land Raider stands by itself, and the Repulsor is different enough to stand next to it, so it does come across as a completely different tank. And all the speeders are quite good. The different variants, they've got different weapons, different abilities, and we have had the other speeders go into Legends, but these 3 guys are much bigger and they bring much more to the battlefield. So things like that have been quite nice to see. It's just the redundancy, most in the infantry units, like the phobos units, struggling to find their place on the battlefield. Check out these other videos, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you next time.